Filmz TV præsenteres i samarbejde med komplet.dk. Velkommen til Filmz TV. I denne uge er der biografpremiere på en god gedigen gyser, nemlig Sinister. Det er historien om en forfatter, spillet af Ethan Hawke, som sammen med sin familie flytter ind i et lille parcelhus, hvor der er sket en forfærdelig forbrydelse. Og i takt med, at forfatteren forsøger at løse den uopklarede tragedie, mister han langsomt besindelsen, samtidig med at husets onde mystiske kræfter trænger sig på. Det lyder måske meget som Ondskabens Hotel, og der er der også flere slående ligheder, men selvom Sinister ikke just er fattig på klichéer, så er den til gengæld hamrende effektiv, enormt velspillet og et must for gyserfans. Du kan læse vores komplette 4-stjernede anmeldelse på Filmz. Og Filmz TV var for nylig i Oslo for at tale med filmens instruktør, Scott Derrickson, som efterhånden er en erfaren herre inden for gysergenren. Han kickstartede spillefilmskarrieren med Hellraiser Inferno, den 5. film i den blodbesmurte føljeton om den grufulde Pinhead, og han stod også bag den prisbelønnede The Exorcism of Emily Rose fra 2005. Senest lavede han science fiction-remaket The Day the Earth Stood Still, en mindre heldig og temmelig langsommelig fadæse, men med Sinister er Derrickson tydeligvis tilbage i sit rette element.
When an audience goes in and sees a really scary movie, they don't come out, dark and oppressed and thinking, oh, who can I kill? Or they come out laughing. They come out something having been lifted from them. And I think there's something very cathartic about a good horror film. And I think that it makes you grateful for your own life. When you see something really scary and then the lights come on and you leave the theater. It's great because you know that it didn't really happen, and your life is so much better than the atrocity that you've seen on film. And there's something about that whole experience that makes you both better equipped to deal with the real horrors of life, and makes you grateful that your life isn't so bad.
It must be a really interesting genre to deal with aesthetically as well, because you get to experiment much more with the visuals, the audio, the music, all those stylistic elements than you do in, let's say, a drama.
It's one of my favorite things about the horror genre. It's probably the most single cinematic genre there is. There really isn't another genre that calls for such ambitious use of lighting and dramatic use of lighting, and such ambitious and audacious use of sound design and music and things like that, And it's one of the reasons why I don't see myself doing, a typical, video camera found footage movie, because they don't have any of that, And I like cinema that's full and has lots to, interact to. If you're able to envision the way these different components are going to fit together, the way that the music and the picture and the lighting and the performance are all going to line up with the narrative story, you can envision how an audience is going to be affected. And that's really the job of the director more than anything else, is to be able to imagine the end result one piece at a time. And sometimes, you can do things that help the rest of the crew understand that as well. I found music for the Super 8 films in Sinister before we started shooting, and I would play that music over loudspeakers while we were shooting, so that everybody could feel this is what it's going to sound like. This is the scary, weird music that's going to play. And I think that made a big impact on the crew and how the camera was operated, and even how it was lit and how the performances went. Like, everybody got it because I was able to give them more pieces of the picture right there on set. But that's what good directing is. Good directing is having an imagination and being able to predict the way these things will go together in the end.
But it's interesting because the movie is obviously about a horror author who writes crime stories and stories about murders and that sort of stuff. And you've also, as both a writer and director, you've dealt with very dark material as well, horror movies, several different, and that, within the genre. Is there some part of you that's reminiscent of this character?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of autobiography in Sinister. You know, I really relate to the writing life that's portrayed there. Even the sweater that he wears all the way through the movie. A lot of writers like me that when they're writing, they have their writing sweater. You know, I like to keep my house cool. I wear the same sweater all the time. Ethan asked to wear glasses exactly like mine. You know. And Ethan and I talked at great length about it, you know, that I related a lot to this character in that, you know, I made my first film that did very well, and my second film wasn't quite as well received, you know, and so that gave me that feeling of, oh, I need to keep my status up, I need to stay successful, and I didn't like the way that felt, and I didn't like the things I was thinking about, and so the process of writing Sinister was a way of confronting some of those fears myself. To me, what's interesting about Sinister is that it is a truly scary movie, and it's a paranormal movie. It has, you know, supernatural horror in it, but the biggest driving fear in the movie is in the character, which is a driving fear of losing his own fame and fortune. And the fact that he's more afraid of that than these horrible films he's looking at. He's more afraid of losing his status than the weird supernatural things that are starting to happen. And that's what makes, I think, his character interesting and a bit relatable. The Shining is the biggest horror movie inspiration on Sinister. I gave a copy of The Shining to Ethan to watch. He had seen it before, but I gave him some specific scenes to look at. The three probably best horror films, in my opinion, would be The Exorcist, of course, The Shining, and probably The Changeling, the Canadian film, which also was really the other big inspiration on this one. I think The Changeling just. In my opinion, the best ghost story, you know, movie that's been made. But there were, you know, the cinematic influences on Sinister were really more obscure and unlikely. Blowout, Brian De Palma's Blowout. I gave a copy of that to Ethan because the movie is a procedural. Sinister is a procedural, and there's a lot of scenes where Ethan is at his computer, you know, trying to solve a mystery and putting things together and dealing with film editing and all of that. And I showed him this Brian De Palma movie, Blowout, where John Travolta is a sound designer cutting together film and trying to solve a mystery by syncing film and his sound recording, and it's very compelling, and it really works. And then Clute, the Alan Pakula movie starring Donald Sutherland, was perhaps the darkest lit film I've ever seen by the great director of photography, Gordon Willis. And I gave a copy of that to the DP, Chris Knorr, and told him, I said, I want the movie to be this dark. You know, and he got very excited about that, about the prospect of making a movie that's visually darker than what you typically see in a movie. It's a genre that's full of a lot of garbage. You know, horror films can be made for low budget, and for that reason, there are a lot of bad ones, and there's a lot of inexperienced directors who go out and make mediocre horror films. The best of the horror genre does get recognized. The best of the horror film. Of the best of horror films, you know, are a lot of them are from the 70s. The Exorcist, The Omen, The Shining, 1980, Rosemary's Baby, 1969. You know, The Silence of the Lambs was the first horror film. I would call it a horror film that won the Oscar. But those are few and far between. You know, in the last 20 years, Seven may be considered a horror film, but not a straight horror film. I think the problem lies less with critics or, you know, Oscar voters, and I think it lies more with the filmmakers, because I think that there aren't enough great filmmakers who are willing to stick with the genre, because the genre is not highly respected. A lot of directors who are good at it come in and make a great horror film, you know, but then they leave the genre. They don't want to continue to elevate the genre. I would love to see Gore Verbinski make another horror film. You know, he came in, he made The Ring. It's one of the best horror films of the last 20 years. And instead of continuing to elevate that genre, he went and made the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, you know? And, you know, good for him. I'm sure he got rich and they're good movies and they're good, fun family movies. But you don't see, you know, we don't have a Hitchcock now. We don't have a Dario Argento, you know? We don't even have a Wes Craven anymore. You know, there aren't directors who are proud to be a part of the genre. And I think what needs to happen is, you know, some of these young directors that are coming up need to stick with the genre and be committed to elevating the art of horror. And Gothic storytelling, horrific storytelling, is a big part of great historical art. I mean, look at, you know, walk through the Louvre in France. It's nothing but a bunch of storyboards for horror films. You know, it's just centuries after century of torture, pain, death, and suffering. You know, and you know, I love the genre, and I want to be a part of trying to elevate it. I want to be a part of a community of filmmakers that are reaching down, trying to pull it up out of its you know, somewhat earned disrespect.
What's the matter? What's happened?
Get the kids, pack the car. We have to leave here now.
Husk, at du kan finde alle vores tidligere Filmz TV-udsendelser på Filmz under Filmz TV-fanebladet, og også på video.dk, i iTunes og via vores gratis video-app.